Hello again, and what is hip, and welcome back to another video. And today I wanted to talk about something truly horrifying, and that's the... oh god, oh okay, no, not quite that horrifying. I want to talk about something slightly less horrifying, but still horrifying nonetheless, taking advantage of the October season that we're in now, and that's none other than the Nintendo GameCube. And now I'm sure a lot of you may just be like, what is he talking about? The GameCube wasn't horrifying. Well, let me tell you, for a 6, 7, 8-year-old kid, the GameCube was kind of horrifying, and I'm gonna get into that. So, when the GameCube came out, a lot of the original Nintendo fans at that point either grew up with the NES or Super Nintendo or maybe even the Nintendo 64, but there were a lot of people who grew up with that Super Nintendo kind of era. And so a lot of those kids at that point, by the time the GameCube came out, they were already in their mid to late teens, early mid 20s. And so Nintendo, realizing this, kind of had to cater to this older audience. So the GameCube is kind of a very edgy approach from Nintendo, even though the console itself was, quite cute. It was a little cube and everything. But the games that came out on it were definitely edgier, made for the late teen audience. And the thing that was really fascinating is a lot of the games that came out were old Nintendo properties that kind of got this edgy makeover. And so by the time the GameCube came out, I was about 4 years old, 4 or 5 years old, and so all of my childhood was spent with the Nintendo GameCube. We were a Nintendo household, and so I grew up with the GameCube. Now, I've mentioned this in other videos, but my parents were Nintendo fans, so we had all of the old Nintendo consoles. So I actually really grew up playing, the NES and the Super Nintendo. That's where I fell in love with Mario 3 on the NES, and Goof Troop on the Super Nintendo, and other games of the sorts. But I got introduced to a lot of Nintendo properties on those older Nintendo systems. And so by that point, when the GameCube was out, I had a fairly, decent amount of knowledge on Nintendo and Nintendo characters and what I thought they should be. Well, a lot of those assumptions were kind of shaken up when I really kind of started playing the GameCube. And the first game I wanted to talk about is a launch title for the system, and that's Luigi's Mansion. I have been familiar with Mario and Wario World on the Super Nintendo. You have those ghost houses and stuff, which always kind of creeped me out as a little kid, but they were never anything too bad. But I knew who Luigi was. I watched the Mario show. I watched all of that, just this goofy character. And then all of a sudden, they place him in this Resident Evil-esque Ghostbusters type game. And let me tell you, this game haunted me. It legitimately scared me. One of my earliest gaming memories is, I think it was around Halloween, or maybe it was around Christmas time. I can't remember the year, I can't remember how old I was, but I'm assuming it was fairly early on in the GameCube life. I was out in the living room with my parents and maybe my uncle, and they were playing Luigi's Mansion on the big old CRT in the living room, and I would watch hiding in this box. I think we had maybe gotten an appliance or something and the box was left over, and I would just peek out of the corner of the box watching him play Luigi's Mansion, because I was way too scared to watch this, obstruction free. Now, I'm gonna be completely honest, I'm a certified pansy. Horror games are games that I really want to enjoy, but I just can't bring myself to actually play them. I can kind of watch other people play them, but when it comes to actually playing the thing, I'll stay in the first room or the first stage and not leave that room because I'm just too scared to move my character around. So I tried playing Luigi's Mansion so many times growing up. I would pop it on I'd watch the intro, and you know, I was always intrigued by the game, but I very rarely ever got past that opening tutorial stage where you meet EGAD and you go and you fight the first boss, all of which can take, you know, maybe half an hour tops to complete. And the music was so eerie, and looking back, you know, it almost sounds goofy, but to a kid who had this determined conception of what Luigi and what Mario was, this threw a monkey wrench in that. And the music was not like Mario, not like the Koji Kondo compositions I had heard, and so it was a very uncomfortable game for me to play. Now, of course, as I got older, I got over that and was able to play through the game, and it's now one of my favorite games of all time. But I'll never forget that memory of just watching my parents play this game and being way too afraid to just even watch directly without hiding in a box. And so the next one here is kind of a surprising one. I think a lot of people will be taken back by this. That's Kirby Air Ride. Now, the game as a whole is not unsettling. However, there is this kind of free play section. It's called City Trial, and you play as Kirby and you just have this kind of open world to explore. And there was something about seeing Kirby, someone who I had seen on Kirby's Dream Land and on the Game Boy and then on the Super Nintendo and on the NES, in this kind of fantasy world, seeing him in a realistic setting in a city was kind of unsettling. It wasn't horrifying, but it was kind of unsettling for me as a little kid. And I loved the game. I really did. But there would be moments when you're playing City Trial mode where like a storm would start brewing, or maybe some weather effects would happen and the skies would change red. And the city itself was so barren. You know, there was nothing in the city except for the other players you're playing with. And so it was just kind of creepy. I don't know why. It never stopped me from playing the game, but I always felt a little unsettled. Even looking back, you know, capturing gameplay footage, it doesn't creep me out now, but I can still kind of remember the unsettled feeling that I had felt. And there was also this ice stage, I remember, and capturing footage for that. And that also just, for some reason, kind of unsettled me. There were these little ghost guys that looked cute, and then you went up to them and then they turned into this monster kind of thing. I remember always being kind of taken aback by that, even when they were featured in the NES. But again, it's a wonderful game, but I guess for like a 6 or 7 year old kid, it's just, you see the world completely differently. And you know, now I don't know why I would have been freaked out or unsettled by this, but I can kind of see why I was, with the bareness and just seeing Kirby thrown into this completely different setting, almost similar to Forgotten Lands on the Nintendo Switch. And the next game here, this one unsettled me a lot, and this is Wario World. For the Gamecube. Now, Wario may be a character full of burps and farts and all of that funny, good comic humor, but this game, this was an era, the PS2 and the Gamecube and even kind of the Sega Saturn, I remember seeing this a lot. There was something about the graphical style of this era that made characters appear a little unsettling. Even looking back now, I'm like, ugh, they're not trying to be creepy, but that character looks kind of weird. And it's, I see it a lot in this, like the CG cutscenes and all of that. Like all the characters just kind of have this almost plastic doll kind of look that was always a little unsettling. And so the graphic style in this always kind of unsettled me. It was this weird borderline realistic, yet completely cartoon and fake kind of style. And again, it wasn't like any other Mario game that came out before this, and Mario was nowhere to be found. Rather, you were playing as Wario and you were fighting against these weird looking monsters, and the music, oh my gosh, the music is almost atmospheric at points. Not quite, not like Breath of the Wild atmospheric, but kind of, it had the weird vibe of Luigi's Mansion, but it went for a more almost barren approach. Like, it wasn't in your face all of the time. And so there are these special stages, little puzzle stages that you would have to go through, and the music became quite sparse and funky and all of that. It doesn't freak me out now, but back then it was a very unsettling kind of thing. Again, I was like, where's Mario? Where's the World 1-1 Super Mario Brothers theme? And it was just a weird, unsettling game for me. But I still loved it. Another unsettling one is Pacman World 2. I know I'm coming off as probably the pansiest of all pansies right now. Similar to Wario World, the graphical style and the cutscenes, the pre-rendered cutscenes of this game, especially that intro, always unsettled me. The ghosts look kind of soulless, no pun intended, but it's just the atmosphere that this game drew up, and I think a big portion of that really is the graphical style of this era. The game itself is wonderful. I absolutely love the game, but some of the characters just look kind of blank. You know, they have this blank stare, and I just always felt super unsettled playing this. Am I the only one who felt this way? Again, this was a 6-7-year-old brain at the time, so of course I was conceiving things a little differently than teenagers and older kids of the sort. But even looking back, like some of the just pre-rendered cutscenes and some of the graphical choices just look a little unsettling. Xtreme G 3. I didn't like this game, but this was a very edgy game, and the very first stage is this big, kind of dark, almost cyberpunky city in the midst of a rainstorm, and it's just very dark and dreary, and the game's trying to be super cool and all of that, but it just always unsettled me, because this was like one of the most adult games that I remember playing as a 6, 7, 8-year-old kid. And the music, again, is very sparse, very cold sounding, synthy and all of that. And I remember I'd always pop this game in, I'd play through the first stage, and I'd just, I'd stop playing after that. Even going back now, it still just feels very soulless. And then after beating that first stage and going to the next stage, which is a completely different setting, it's also this kind of barren kind of setting, and just, I don't know, something about this game. And I think the reason it still kind of unsettles me now is just the effect it had on me as a kid, you know? Again, this was not the Nintendo that I was used to playing. This was not the Super Nintendo. This was a more mature, cooler Nintendo, almost like Sega in a way. You know, back when, with the Genesis and the Saturn, Sega was very much playing the cool kid on the block. It felt like Nintendo was stepping in and kind of doing the same thing with the Gamecube. Now, there are 2 more games that I want to talk about here. Now, this next one is a game that I could not find. I couldn't find it when I was looking through my shelves. I have no idea where it is. It must be back home. But it's Super Smash Bros. Melee. That's how I pronounced it as a kid. Might not be Melee, might be Melee. Who knows? Probably Melee. But I remember renting this game from Hollywood Video, which was a Blockbuster kind of rental store back where I was from. and I was looking through the Gamecube section, and of course, being as young as I was at the time, I wasn't well versed in the gaming landscape, so I didn't know what games were coming out. I didn't know what games were already out. I went to this Hollywood Video to find out, oh, what new games are there for me to play, and one of the ones I found was Super Smash Bros. Melee. Now, having never heard of this game before, I looked at the cover and I was like, oh, there's Mario, but there's Zelda, and there's Kirby, and there's all these other people on the cover. What is this? And so, of course, I picked it up and I rented it. I went home, and I think there's a one-player story mode-esque section of the game. And I was playing through it, and again, we're going back to the graphics here, but the way that they had conceived these characters that had been apparent in consoles past, they did the art styles in a more realistic way. Like the jeans had actual thread and they looked like real jeans, or overalls, rather than like cartoony things. It was a very strange thing for me to see, and I remember it not sitting very well with me. I mean, even going back and playing Luigi's Mansion at the time, which was a game that unsettled me, and seeing the model in there, and then seeing the model of Luigi in Super Smash Bros., I was like, what is going on? This does not compute. And so that threw me off. For all the characters, Bowser looked like a reptile, which always, again, unsettled me. But there was this one part of the game where you played through, and there are these undead creatures. I think they're called Redeads or something from Ocarina of Time. And at this point, I don't believe I had ever played Ocarina of Time. So I saw these things freak me out. I stopped playing. I was like, what the heck is a zombie character thing doing in my kid-friendly Nintendo series? Like, this is not okay. Something must be happening at Nintendo. They're going through an existential crisis. Little did I know that those characters were in Zelda games of the past. But again, just seeing that freaked me out, and especially in a game where Mario and Yoshi or Kirby was present. It was all very, very strange for me. And so, again, Melee was a game that I put away for a long time because it just unsettled me so much. And then I picked up as I got older, and of course I ended up loving it and all of that. But again, it was just very much a shock for a young kid at the time. And the next game is also a game that I do not have present here, because I could not find my copy. I think it's back home in Oregon, but it's Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. Now, I think this one is a little more understandable for some. This was very much the most adult Zelda game that came out at the time. You know, you could argue Majora's Mask was also up there, but just graphic-wise and all of that, it was very much the most adult. And I first heard, I didn't know what Legend of Zelda was, but I heard of it from a friend in 3rd grade. I'll never forget this. His name was Marco, and he was telling me about this new adventure game that just came out. And I was intrigued. He said it was called Legend of Zelda. He said, go check it out the next time you have a chance. And so I went to Hollywood Video, and I found a copy of Twilight Princess. And I was looking, and I saw that it was rated T for teen. And I was like, oh, I wonder why. And it said, I think it might have said depictions of blood or something. There are some gates in the game that I specifically remember. They have like red stuff on it. I assumed it was blood. Maybe it was paint, but I'm pretty sure it was blood. And I remember my friend telling me about this too, and I was like, I don't know. That might be too much for me to play. Again, certified pansy. But again, got home, started playing it, started off great, really enjoyed my time, and then these dark creatures came, and then the Twilight World came around, completely changed my view of the thing. The music changed, you had this Midna character, you were a wolf, and you were seeing these like ghost spirits in a world that had this like black and gray filter devoid of color. It was a very, very unsettling experience. Now, the only thing that was different about this is that it didn't get me unsettled to the point like Luigi's Mansion and all of that to where I stopped playing, because at this point I was in 3rd grade, I was getting a little older, so I was able to stick through it. And so I remember going through the game and always feeling unsettled, but I was enjoying my time, of course. And some of the characters in this game are kind of freaky. The designs for their faces are weird and very cartoony, but they have a realistic like texture. It was, again, threw me off, and I think it was just seeing the combination of like realistic and cartoony meshed together that kind of made me unsettled, and still sometimes make me unsettled today. There's this little baby character called Milo or something who runs a shop, and he's just got big old bug eyes and just freaky looking, a little weird looking baby. But yeah, I played through it and I got to the water dungeon, and I stopped playing for a while. But it was just a game that always kind of unsettled me. I loved it. It was my first Zelda game, and the game that introduced me to all of the other Zelda games. Ocarina of Time was my second Zelda game, and then I saw the re-dead zombies that were in Melee in that game. And again, I just remember being like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. I can't maneuver through Clock Town because these zombies are here. Yeah, Twilight Princess was another one. Now, the last one here, again, my Gamecube copy is back home, which is why I have a Switch version of it here. And that is the Pikmin series, specifically Pikmin 1. And Pikmin 1 was one of the first Gamecube games that we had. I don't remember how we got it, don't remember when we got it, I don't remember who got it. I don't think they got it specifically for me, because I was very young at this point, probably 5 or 6, maybe 7. And this was a game that I could never play through, but I would always start over time and time again. There are 30 in-day games that you have, and I'd play through maybe 4 or 5 in-day games, and then it would get too hard or it'd get a little too creepy, and then I'd stop and then I'd start over again. It was a charming game. I loved this game, but it was freaky for multiple reasons. The first was there's a time limit. I hate time limits. Majora's Mask I've never beaten because of that 3-day time limit. And so this had, your day and night system, or your day countdown until night, and then you had 30 days to beat the game. That was horrifying for me. Absolutely horrifying. And another thing is that the music, though I loved it at the time as well, was very kind of atmospheric and creepy, similar to Wario World and Luigi's Mansion, but in a less, I guess, directly creepy way. It was creepy in a nature-centric kind of way. I don't know quite how to describe it, but it was always a little unsettling. Just like, it was calm, but it was also eerie. And it was just also kind of unsettling playing as this little guy with these little Pikmin, knowing that there were these giant creatures out there to get you. And some of the bug creatures specifically that crawled out of the ground, always kind of threw me off, kind of freaked me out a little bit. And then there's this one section where you play in a cave where it's dark. That's always where I stopped playing the game. It was just, I didn't like traveling in the dark, not knowing what was going to be around every corner, on top of the time limit, am I taking too long? It was just a game that made me very uncomfortable, but I loved the tutorial stage, and I liked the first stage or 2 that you play after the tutorial, because they were the easiest and they were in bright sunlight. So again, I would always turn off the GameCube, start it over again, and just play through those first couple of stages. And eventually I did play through the game, and I beat the game, and it's my favorite Pikmin of all time, and one of my favorite games of all time. But it was just again, unsettling. And I knew when I was younger that these games were not made for me. Not made for my little 6-7-year-old self. But I loved Nintendo and I loved their games, so I continued to play them. But I just knew. I was like, this is not the Mario, this is not the Nintendo that I'm used to, the Super Nintendo, NES kind of Nintendo. I didn't think that was a bad thing, but I thought it was a scary thing. At least until I became adjusted to it, and then when I became a little bit older, of course, I loved the direction that they were going. But there you have it. There's just a couple of stories about the GameCube and why it was a very important system in my life, as it introduced me to the modern Nintendo after playing my parents' hand-me-down systems for so long, but also why it kind of freaked me out and it was kind of unsettling for a kid growing up in this era, having been so used to seeing a more kid-friendly version of Nintendo, and then seeing Nintendo age up right in front of your eyes and seeing characters change right in front of your eyes. It was my first exposure to sitting through a director's change of vision, I guess. But yeah, it was a good time. Unsettling at points, but a wonderful time nonetheless. Do you guys feel similar to me? I'm really curious to know, especially people my age. Like, did this Nintendo kind of unsettle you? Did you have any other games that unsettled you? I didn't talk about any of the Resident Evils or any of those directly pure horror games, because I didn't play them because they scared me. Certified pansy again. But let me know in the comments below. I would love to know what you guys think. But thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you for all the support that you have been giving me since I have come back from my 6-7+ month hiatus. It means the world. Thanks again. Have a good one.